My husband always says that his mother is the most wonderful woman in the world. I used to think that was sweet until I realized that in his eyes, I would never measure up to her. On my birthday, instead of spending a warm and intimate moment with the person I love, I had to sit through an awkward group call with his family arranged by his mother herself. When I didn't call her back because I was sick and exhausted, my husband went completely silent for the rest of the evening, as if I had committed some terrible crime. So it's fine if I'm sad, but if his mom is upset, the whole world has to stop. Am I overreacting, or did he truly choose his mother over his wife? I used to think that when two adults get married, love would be the strongest bond, but I was wrong. In my own marriage, I've come to realize there's always been a third person present. Not some secret lover, but my mother in law. From the very first day I became her daughter in law, I tried my best to build a good relationship with her. I listened, I was patient, I joined every call and gathering. She arranged even when I felt exhausted or out of place. But over time, I started to see a pattern. Everything always had to go her way, and my husband, the one who should have been the bridge between two generations, kept siding with her even when it hurt me. We live abroad, so we don't see my mother in law very often, but maybe because of that distance, every time we do talk, it turns into some kind of major event that I'm not allowed to skip on my birthday instead of having a quiet, intimate moment with my husband and child. The day turns into a stage where she plays the role of the loving and generous mother. She gathers the whole extended family for a video call to celebrate me. But after a brief birthday greeting, they all spend over an hour chatting amongst themselves. I'm just an excuse, my birthday. Completely taken over, I used to stay silent, thinking, it's just one day a year. But the more I kept quiet, the more they took it for granted. That small, cozy family dinner I had hoped for. Delayed because my husband was busy catching up with his relatives on that call. I waited at the table, food getting cold. And somewhere along the way, my heart did too. The breaking point came last year when I fell sick on my birthday. I truly didn't have the strength to pretend to be cheerful on that call. When my mother in law called, I didn't answer, not out of spite, but because I was tired, I was weak, and I just needed to rest. But when my husband came home, the first thing he said wasn't, how are you feeling? It was, Mom called to wish you a happy birthday, and you didn't pick up. Call her back. I shook my head and said, I didn't have the energy physically or emotionally. He didn't insist, but that entire evening I felt the weight of his disapproval in his eyes, in his silence, in the coldness of his behavior. He didn't wish me a happy birthday, didn't dance with me like he did every other year, all because I didn't return his mother's call. It wasn't about the missed phone call anymore. It was a clear sign that in his heart, the scale always tipped more toward his mother than his wife. And what hurt the most wasn't the missed greeting. It was the lack of understanding from the man I once believed would stand by me no matter how strong or fragile I might be. I began to wonder in this marriage, who is he truly trying to please? And if every time I speak up, I'm told I'm being too much, is there still a place for me in this family? After that night, I really thought he would finally understand that on special occasions like a wife's birthday, the priority should go to your life partner, not to an outdated family tradition that only leaves people feeling drained. But I was too optimistic. We talked a lot. From tense conversations between just the two of us to marriage counseling sessions with a third party, I tried to explain that what I needed wasn't to win some battle between a daughter in law and a mother in law. I just needed a little empathy and some clear boundaries between two roles, wife and mother. I never asked him to stop loving his mom. But if he had to choose between protecting his wife's feelings and preserving his mother's pride, could he just this once choose me? He listened, nodded, promised. He said he understood, but then everything returned to the way it was. This year, I thought it would be different. We had agreed in advance that my birthday would be just for us. No phone calls, no group celebration, Just a quiet evening like the ones we used to have when we were still in love. Candles, music, and a sense of peace in our own home. But just like clockwork, the phone rang. And yes, it was his mother. I looked at my husband. I didn't get angry. I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. And in that look, I hoped he would remember all the times I cried, all the things I had once said, once pleaded. But he just picked up the phone and said quickly, "Let me answer and call you back later, Mom." That was when I realized the problem wasn't his mother. The problem was him, the man who says he loves his wife but never stands up for her. He didn't see how his mom always chose my birthday to call and gather the whole family as a subtle form of control, masking intrusion with sweetness. He didn't see that my refusal to join those calls wasn't out of disrespect. It was because I was tired of feeling like an outsider on my own special day. After that call, he acted like everything was normal, but I couldn't I couldn't keep pretending I wasn't hurt. I couldn't keep saying it's fine while bearing my feelings like I didn't even exist in this relationship. What I needed wasn't a fancy party or expensive gifts. What I needed was acknowledgement that I mattered, that my emotions were valid and worthy of being heard, that when a wife says I'm hurt, her husband doesn't respond with, but mom's hurt too. And if his love for me always comes with a silent asterisk, unless it upsets mom, then is that love really mine? Or am I just the third wheel in a mother son bond that was never willing to make space for anyone else? Since that day, I stopped expecting too much. Not because I stopped loving him, but because I began to understand something deeper. Some people don't change, not because they're unwilling, but because they simply don't see the need to. My husband isn't a bad man. He doesn't yell, cheat, or abandon responsibilities, but he has a massive blind spot, and that blind spot looks exactly like his mother. I remember clearly the evening after my birthday this year. Dinner was done. Our child was playing in the other room. He was lying on the sofa, scrolling through his phone like nothing had happened, and I sat at the dining table removing candles from the cake I had ordered for myself, because I didn't want to bother anyone. As I pulled out each candle, it felt like I was pulling out the last bits of hope I had left. I asked, "Did you notice that I was sad?" He looked up, surprised, then sighed. "Are we talking about this again?" Mom was just calling to say, "Happy birthday. You're making it sound like she ruined your day on purpose." I smiled softly, a smile so faint I couldn't even hear it inside myself. "You don't have to admit anything. I just want to know, in all the times I told you I was hurt, have you ever tried to put yourself in my shoes?" He didn't answer. The silence stretched like a curtain covering up any possible explanation. I realized then that for years I'd done what so many wives have done, trying to be agreeable, trying to be patient, sacrificing for the sake of keeping the peace. So I wouldn't be labeled selfish, so I wouldn't be seen as unreasonable. I believed that if I was gentle enough, things would change. But some things, the more you give in, the more they get dismissed. The more you sacrifice, the more it feels expected. Every time I said, "I don't want to take a call from your mother today," I wasn't asking him to choose sides. I was simply asking, "Can you respect my feelings just once? Can you understand that on my birthday, just one day, I wanted to be myself, not the picture perfect daughter in law in a script I never wrote?" And then I began to wonder about deeper things. If something as simple as a phone call on my birthday can't be understood, what about the bigger things in life? Raising our child, caring for aging parents, choosing where we live, deciding what really matters. Will I even have a voice when those choices come? Because marriage in the end isn't about who's right or wrong. It's about whether, when one person is hurt, the other is willing to stop and listen. I've stopped so many times, but he hasn't. And the part that hurts the most, it's not that my mother-in-law called. It's that the man I trusted, the one who held my hand on our wedding day and promised to put me first, can't even see that I'm slowly fading away inside this marriage. Maybe he still loves me somewhere in his heart, but that love always has to make room, and I don't know if I have the strength to keep waiting behind that closed door forever. I began living in a state of being aware but exhausted. Everything still looked the same. He went to work. I cared for our child. We still had dinner together with smiles and small talk, but something essential was missing connection. Ever since that birthday, we hadn't fought, but we also hadn't truly talked. He stayed silent, and so did I. Each of us locked ourselves into a safe space that felt peaceful on the surface, but was really just a shell for a marriage quietly cracking underneath. I've always believed that any problem in a marriage can be solved as long as both people want to fix it. But when only one person is trying, can it still be called together? I remembered the couples therapy sessions we used to attend. I once told the therapist I don't want to be a problem. He has to choose between his mother and his wife. I just want him to understand that when I'm hurting, I need to feel protected. The therapist asked him, "What do you think would happen if you prioritized your wife's feelings over your mother's?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I think my mom would be very upset." And that was the moment I realized it wasn't that I didn't matter to him. It's just that his guilt toward his mother always outweighed the real living emotions of his partner. He wasn't cruel. He was simply stuck in a relationship where boundaries had never been clearly drawn. After that last session, I didn't say much anymore. Not because I had given up, but because I understood repeating myself wouldn't make someone listen. Some truths can only be heard in silence when all the explanations have run dry, and the heart finally quiets down enough to see how far off course it's gone. I turned inward. I spent more time with our child, with my work, with the things that reminded me I was valuable. Not just as a wife, I started doing yoga again, picked up reading, and occasionally met up with friends. At first he asked, "Where are you going?" or "Why didn't you come home for dinner?" But slowly he got used to my absence. One night I came home late and found him eating alone. He didn't scold me, didn't raise his voice. He simply looked up and said, "Mom called today. She asked why you haven't been talking to her lately." I replied calmly, "I don't know what to say to someone who doesn't want to listen." That wasn't meant as a jab at his mother, but rather it was meant for him. Because for years I had spoken so much, I had cried, explained hurt, but I had never heard anything clear or decisive from the one person who was supposed to understand me the most. I've started thinking about the future, not because I'm planning to leave, but because I'm preparing myself for a different reality, one where I no longer wait for someone to stand beside me, but choose instead to stand tall for myself. Because in the end, if the person beside you no longer wants to walk with you, can you still move forward on your own? But this time on feet that no longer bleed. Life goes on, but something inside me has changed, something that can never go back to the way it was. It wasn't one big event or a dramatic shock. It was a slow accumulation of tiny cracks. Another birthday ignored, another moment dismissed, another time I had to step back just to preserve a relationship that only I seemed to be holding on to. One morning as I was making coffee, I overheard our little daughter ask her dad, "Daddy, why is mommy always sad?" He paused for a second, then said, "She's just a little tired, sweetheart." Don't worry, that answer made my heart sink. Not because it was wrong, but because it was so familiar. That's how he's always avoided things, brushing over real issues with soft words like, "You're just sensitive, you're overthinking, you're just tired." He didn't want to face the truth that the woman who once loved him enough to leave her hometown to build a life in a place far from everything she knew had slowly withered in the very home they built together. I sat down and looked at our daughter eating breakfast. She's so much like I was at her age, sensitive, curious, always wondering about the world, and I thought about her future. Will she learn to love like her mother, always yielding, always putting others first? Or will she be strong enough to speak up when she's hurting? I don't want my daughter to grow up thinking silence is love, that endurance is the way to keep a family together. I don't want her to sit in a cold marriage someday and wonder why she feels so lonely while still sharing a home with someone. And so I started writing, not a breakup letter, not a list of complaints, but a letter to myself, the woman who used to smile at promises, who waited for things to change, who believed that being good enough would eventually earn the love she deserved. I wrote down all the feelings I had buried. I wrote about birthdays, about phone calls, about the pain of watching my husband prioritize his mother's feelings over my own joy. I wrote so I could understand that I wasn't wrong to feel hurt, and I wasn't wrong to start thinking about saving myself. After many sleepless nights, I asked my husband to sit down, not to argue, not to make him choose, but to finally say the one thing I should have said. A long time ago, I don't need you to choose between your mom and me. I just need to know that in your heart, there's a space where I'm allowed to be sad, to be vulnerable, and to be heard. He didn't respond right away. And maybe like so many times before, he won't say anything at all. But this time, I'm not waiting for a reaction. I'm not hoping for a hug or a promise, because I've learned the most important lesson of all. If you have to beg for love in your own relationship, then it's no longer love. And if you have to lose yourself just to keep someone who never really held on to you, then maybe it's time to let go. Not because the love is gone, but because the pain has stayed far too long. To the women who feel tired in their own homes, if you've ever felt lonely even with someone by your side, if you've ever swallowed your tears because you were afraid of being called too sensitive, if you've ever wondered, am I asking for too much? Please remember this. Your feelings are real and you deserve to be respected. You are not selfish for wanting to be prioritized on your special day. You are not unreasonable for needing a partner who listens and protects you from the things that hurt. Love should not be a place where you have to compete for space, and it should never be a quiet war between your heart and your silence. Be brave enough to speak up, and if no one listens, be strong enough to walk away, because you deserve a happiness that doesn't require you to lose yourself. That's the end of today's story. If this message touched you, please leave a comment, like, share, and subscribe to support us. Thank you for listening. See you in the next video.